Greetings, magical souls, and welcome back for another reflections video. As most of you know, I've been working on something over the past few months that has really surprised me. I'm going through all of my old animal communication sessions as part of what I have called Project Treasure. And I've now listened to dozens upon dozens upon dozens of communications that I've had throughout the years. Originally, I simply thought I was going to find some simple quotes, some little nuggets of wisdom, and moments that I thought I could share with you. And as you know, I have found all of that. But something else has started happening in these sessions, something I never, ever expected. A pattern has now begun to emerge. And I honestly think it might be one of the biggest things the animals have ever shown me. One of the biggest assumptions that we make is that our animals are simply reacting to life or to what's going on around them. We see a dog that's anxious, a cat that's quiet, a horse that's gentle, or a bird that's playful. And we think we're observing their personality. But I'm beginning to wonder whether they're doing something much bigger than just expressing themselves. Because over and over again, I've watched the animals mirror us, hold space for us, sense the change in us before we even know it's happening, become catalysts for our transformation, clear the energy of a home, expand and open a person's heart, help somebody process grief, simply bring peace, bring joy, and even ground an entire family. And suddenly I find myself asking, what are the animals actually doing? Because perhaps the greatest gift they offer isn't just companionship. Perhaps it's consciousness. Now, here's where things became really interesting. As a slightly silly example, a horse isn't trying to become more like a dolphin. A cat isn't trying to become more like a dog. Never. A poodle isn't comparing itself to the Labrador next door. Imagine if every tree spent its whole life wishing it were a mountain, or every dolphin wished it were an eagle. Nature would collapse into confusion. Instead, every being simply expresses its own nature. Every tree becomes more tree. Every bird becomes more bird. Every whale becomes more whale. And because every being expresses its own nature, the entire ecosystem then thrives. Humans, however, we seem to be the only species constantly trying not to be ourselves. We're trying to fit in. We're trying to follow all the trends. We're trying to sound like someone else. We're trying not to be too much. And we're trying not to be too weird. And we're also trying not to stand out. And I suddenly realized that the animals don't do any of that. They simply express the fullest qualities of their own soul through the form that they have chosen to be in. And because they do, everyone around them changes. And that stopped me in my tracks. Because look at what I've been seeing. One dog never tries to heal anyone. She simply expresses who she is, and the people around her just begin to heal. One cat simply lives as herself, and the whole atmosphere of the home becomes more peaceful. Another cat simply expresses his own nature, and transmutation naturally happens around him. A little poodle simply embodies his gentle, grounded soul, and that groundedness spreads throughout the entire family. None of them are trying to become another animal. None of them are trying to impress anybody. None of them are performing. They simply are. And that's when I got goosebumps, because humans spend an enormous amount of energy asking, how do we change the world? But I don't think that that's the question that the animals are asking. I think that they're asking something completely different. And that is, how completely can I be myself? And somehow, the first question is answered by the second. Because if consciousness really is contagious, and Project Treasure is beginning to suggest that it is, then every authentic being changes the field simply by existing within it as themselves. Not because they're perfect, not because they're loud, not because they're influential, but because they are coherent. And I think that word matters. We hear it a lot, coherent. Their inner world and their outer expression match 100%. There isn't a split. There isn't performance. There isn't a mask. There isn't a carefully constructed identity. There is simply, this is who I am. And that coherence ripples outward. And as I sat with all of this, another realization hit me. This isn't just what the animals have been doing. It's what's quietly been happening to me as I've been doing this. Over the last year, I haven't become a better animal communicator because I've tried harder. I haven't become more aligned because I've chased algorithms. I haven't become more fulfilled because I've copied people who seem to be successful on YouTube. Quite the opposite. I've been peeling away everything that wasn't really me. The over-explaining, the spiritual cliches that never quite resonated, the pressure to fit into someone else's idea of what this work that I do should look like, the fear of sounding too different, the fear of being too weird. And do you know what has actually happened through this whole process? Is that being magic hasn't become more polished. It has simply become more M. And then another realization arrived. The animals haven't just been changing the people that I work with. They have been changing me. I always knew that they were changing me somehow, in some way, but I just never really realized how much. And all this time, I believed my mission was to help people see that animals are souls just like us, wearing different suits. That's always what I say. But perhaps they've been showing me something much, much bigger. Perhaps this is why I've always said that the animals are the bridge to New Earth. They're leading the way. And it's not because they're taking us somewhere new, but it's because they're quietly demonstrating what remembered consciousness actually looks like every single day, without trying to convince anybody, without preaching, without performing, without persuading. Simply by being exactly who they are. So perhaps we have been asking the wrong question. Instead of asking, how do I change the world? Maybe the question we should be asking is, how completely am I willing to become myself? Because if Project Treasure has taught me anything, it's that every animal changes the landscape simply by expressing the truth of who they are. And maybe, just maybe, that's what we're here to remember too. And I have to smile because I thought Project Treasure was going to help me show the world how extraordinary the animals are, which it is doing. But what I didn't expect was that the animals would quietly reveal something about humanity as a whole, or about me. And perhaps that is the greatest treasure of all. Because when we finally remember who we truly are deep within, we don't just change ourselves, we change the landscape around us. And magical souls, to me, that is the real magic.